Hello and welcome to this video on how you can make a bonsai to gift during Christmas. Giving someone a bonsai for Christmas is not new. Many people will have had their first experience this way, and often will have been an experience that ended in dissatisfaction and disaster. For that reason, we have prepared this video on what species, what trees, what items, and how to prepare them or not prepare them for a beginner. Many will receive a bonsai from a nursery. As we have said before, these are just dead trees in a nice pot that do not know they are dead yet. This is because they are often neglected by the commercial or retail outlets, or if they are maintained, they're maintained in the wrong way, which leads to their death. If you want to go this pathway, go to a dedicated bonsai nursery. If this is not possible, then start by choosing a good species to make a bonsai yourself. You will give the recipient a much better start, a much better tree, and they'll be able to enjoy what they're doing, which means you can avoid dissatisfaction and disaster. Pines, for instance, are not necessarily beginner friendly. For the most part, we suggest avoiding conifers as well. Junipers are perhaps the only exception to this general category. Otherwise, something like a fig, olive, and maple would be your choice. These four species are what you could consider traditional options. Jade trees, willow, jasmine, ivy, and rosemary are less traditional, but also very viable options. Avoid any species with quirks, high maintenance, or slow growth. This will exclude oak, many pines, beech, fuchsia, citrus, most fruiting species for that matter, and others not explicitly listed unless you are familiar with the growth habit. Good species for a beginner will be resilient, fast-growing, and responsive to training, while not being subject to quirks, wire damage, or dieback. That is because a beginner will make mistakes and need to learn, not get it right the first time. A species that falls dead from one mistake will just discourage them, not help their growth. Any of the species we've mentioned can be bought from a nursery and in many cases even a big box store, so you won't lack for options to get these. Next is the choice of pot. Do you give them a growing, training, or nursery pot, or do you go with a bonsai pot? A bonsai pot has a finite life, and this is because it is ceramic and exposed to changes in temperature. A training pot is more forgiving and theoretically should last much longer. A growing pot or nursery pot is even more forgiving, but it's not very supportive of the ideals for bonsai, or at least not the idyllic images of bonsai. Further, a bonsai pot will slow growth, while a training pot can help with the growth of a tree. We suggest compromising in terms of this. Not a proper bonsai pot or a growing pot or training pot, but instead a training pot that looks like a bonsai pot. These are often made from plastic, but much larger than a proper bonsai pot, while still holding to the same shape and features. This means that the individual that you're gifting this to gets familiar with many of the oddities around the bonsai pot. For example, you have things like tie-down points, the necessary wiring of the pot internally for mesh and similar. You also have the features of a bonsai pot such as drainage holes. You can use bonsai soil in it or regular soil. This will help to keep the bonsai growing for a much longer time, and further to that, you can use regular soil mixes. This will keep the bonsai growing for longer. This is because it will retain water, nutrition, and be usable with both normal and bonsai soil mixes. This removes the need for much of the high maintenance. There is a less regular need to water or maintain things. Without needing special soil mixes or tools, you can get away with less and introduce the individual more gradually. By doing all of this, you minimize the chances of the bonsai dying and ruining the hopes of the recipient. Next is of course the top dressing. Commercial top dressing is a sort of compressed, crushed rock thing that is solid. It is terrible for water absorption and retention in bonsai soil. Do not use this and avoid buying any tree that has this, as the roots tend to be baked and die off, or water does not properly permeate the soil across the entire pot, rather it only enters around the periphery. Use some sort of loose gravel mix instead. Lots of loose material for water to flow through and air to escape out of the soil. Another option is something like sand or moss. These have their strengths and weaknesses. Sand creates a semi-solid mass, but it can be broken up. At the same time, water can largely permeate through, while air has trouble getting out. Moss creates some water resistance and needs to be kept moist. Any of these things, whether it is gravel, sand, moss, or something else of your choosing, will work, and they are much better than what is available commercially. Next are tools. Realistically, all you need to start with are 3 things: a pair of secateurs, a pair of good leaf scissors which you can substitute for by buying thread scissors, and a set of wire cutters. These will let you do most every job you need for a beginner bonsai. Nothing fancy or expensive that will deter starting. You should also look at buying some thin gauge wire, something like 1, 2 and 3mm wire. A new bonsai that is starting from nursery stock, for instance, will only need these, and probably those small quantities will last for a long time. The 3mm wire is for the trunk, while 2 and 1mm wire is for the branches and foliage pads. Over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, you can acquire or gift more tools or wire as needed. Finally, the last tool is going to be knowledge. Get them in contact with a club, society, or mentor. If this is not possible or not something you're comfortable with, buy or borrow books. Use YouTube videos like this and get them used to finding answers and trying things for themselves while keeping a record. This means they'll know what works and what doesn't work. While we've given some very clear guidance here, you can opt to change the following. For example, try giving them a series of nursery trees in growing pots and the tools. No bonsai pots or anything else that's going to make it a proper bonsai. That is so the recipient can get used to working with the tools and styling the trees. This can then later be turned into a bonsai if they wish. In the meantime, they can find a species that they like and that they can get familiar with the process of styling and maintaining a bonsai without a lot of the trouble that goes into having them in a bonsai pot or training pot. Doing this will remove the demoralizing effect of killing that new, special bonsai, but it does leave the option open to turn them into a proper bonsai, pot and all, in the near future. The other benefit is that this option keeps the tree or shrub growing stronger and faster for longer. That means better recovery and hopefully better nabari. You also get more growth sooner. This means any mistakes that occur along the way can be recovered from sooner. You can also instead opt to provide a more advanced tree, such as Yamadori specimens, or those you are removing from your own garden or yard. This would mean that you need some other tools, and the ones you would need to add as necessary include something like concave cutters. Other than this, you can get away with much of the same toolset we've already mentioned. In the end, the choice is yours, but we suggest these options instead of buying a bonsai kit or ready-made bonsai as it is, unless you go through a bonsai nursery. This will maximize the chances of success and enjoyment of bonsai, not an all-too-soon end to an aspirant's bonsai experience, which often puts individuals off forever. Hopefully with this video being published now, you have time and opportunity to find what you need and want, and prepare it as a gift if that's your wish, or to start now. Understanding that in different parts of the world you may either be soon to enter winter or about to enter into summer, and this may limit the options available to you. Despite that, we strongly suggest this over other possible ways of getting bonsai to gift to individuals. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions you have below.